The usage of social networking sites is empirically becoming increasingly used on a daily basis. As Elliot Panic states, people ranging from those born in the 21st century to those in college and just now entering the workforce all participate heavily in social media. Daily usage of SNS has now become a commonplace lifestyle. Thus, the presence of this media needs to be fully understood and brought into the light. For this reason, studying the effects of these media and what drives people to perpetuate these technological media has become an increasingly popular field of academic study. But what is the initial factor that drives us to use such media, and what causes us to keep using them? In his work, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Sigmund Freud outlines all of the potential reasons for why people act in the manner that they do. From hedonism to self-preservation, Freud seemingly denotes all motives behind people's actions. Thus, we use his conclusions as a basis to understand the proliferation of social media in the 21st century. Keeping Freud's framework in mind, this video will challenge his position by examining multiple recent studies regarding the use of Facebook.
When Freud wrote his work in the 1920s, he argued that people acted in accordance with or beyond the pleasure principle. The pleasure principle is, according to Freud, when the immense majority of our mental processes would have to be accompanied by pleasure or to lead to pleasure. Otherwise, Freud says there are three other reasons people act beyond the pleasure principle. The first alternative occurs when the pleasure principle will be inhibited by other principle deemed the reality principle. In a life or death situation, people will put their well-being above pleasure. The next alternative occurs when people will not act towards pleasure, but instead towards unpleasure. Freud identifies this as neurosis, as it's only someone who is neurotic, such as victims of tragic neurosis and war neurosis, who continually endure unpleasure. The final alternative for human behavior, Freud argues, is one of an economic nature. That is to say, people will trade unpleasure for pleasure.
In an empirical study on factors affecting continuous intention of using Facebook, a group of Turkish citizens averaging age 25 were tested to study the motives behind Facebook use. This study finds that the satisfaction that status seeking and entertainment bring about allows users to experience Facebook positively, and thus has, quote, an indirect effect on continuous intention to use Facebook. Another study titled Entertainment 2.0, The Role of Intrinsic and Extrinsic Need Satisfaction for the Enjoyment of Facebook Use, found that there are several possible reasons why people use Facebook. They argued that mere pleasure is not enough to perpetuate Facebook use. Furthermore, the connectedness and sentiments that one feels when using Facebook satisfies intrinsic needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Moreover, Facebook also promises entertainment, which leads to enjoyment, though not necessarily pleasure. From these studies, we can determine three things. First, the status-seeking component refers to the self-perception one builds while using Facebook. One's profile and image have shown to improve one's, quote, self-confidence and self-esteem, as users, quote, establish status within the community. Thus, we can appreciate Facebook as an agent for further fulfilling a user's intrinsic self-needs. Second, Facebook is used to satisfy extrinsic needs, like the cultural demands to use it. And thirdly, if these two needs are not being met, then the entertainment factor causes enjoyment or pleasure, which also encourages Facebook use.
A study called Facebook Use Predicts Declines in Subjective Well-Being in Young Adults determined the longer use of Facebook led to less life satisfaction. This study suggested that the mental state of the subjects reflected their experience while on Facebook. So if the users felt bad, Facebook did nothing to improve their well-being. Similarly, another study titled Well-Being and Problematic Facebook Use used students determined that if a user is happy, they tend not to have problematic Facebook use. One is unhappy on the other hand, and that individual is more susceptible to overuse. This shows that even if pleasure is not derived from Facebook nor intrinsic needs satisfied, it will still be used. Thus, we can understand people use Facebook either because they are neurotic, as Freud suggests, or participate to satisfy the extrinsic expectations, or participate for unknown reasons. A final study conducted at Jongbu University finds that SNS in general enriches interpersonal communication or otherwise compensates for insufficient interpersonal communication. According to the study, people either derive pleasure from SNS or use it to compensate for their lack of social interactions and hence satisfy an intrinsic need to belong. The study How Non-Consumption Shapes Desire finds that if one is lacking in social skills and does not have meaningful relationships in reality, they can turn to the virtual world of social networking sites to find the salient substitute. Thus, we can see users that compensate on social media as deriving a substitute for their insufficient interpersonal communication. The Facebook substitute is often salient or satisfactory, and hence these users satisfy an intrinsic need.
As Facebook has become a more permanent fixture in everyday life, understanding why people use and continue to use Facebook with Freud's framework in mind can further this study along. Ultimately, this video has shown that Freud's conclusions cannot answer all of the motives behind Facebook's proliferation, as the motivations are various and go beyond his reasons. Freud said that we act to derive pleasure, to accept unpleasure in exchange for future pleasure, to preserve our lives, and out of neurosis. Of the studies we observed, we can see that the reasons which drive people to use Facebook include pleasure seeking, possible neurotic behavior, self-fulfillment in the forms of extrinsic and intrinsic need satisfaction, or further reasons currently unknown. But from what we know, we can see that the pleasure derived from Facebook's entertainment aspect can be the pleasure principle at play. Furthermore, the use of Facebook when it does nothing to improve one's well-being can be a neurotic tendency and explained by Freud. However, the self-fulfillment, that is, the extrinsic and intrinsic need satisfaction that causes people to use Facebook, is not explained by Freud. Rather, we can see that there are needs that people desire to have fulfilled, like a sense of belonging or the verification of one's self-worth. Satisfying these needs does not induce pleasure, but leads to contentedness. This contentedness drives people to use Facebook, and in going with Samuel Fleischbacher's feedback cycle, the satisfaction instigates further Facebook use. Thus, we can see that although Freud's analysis is applicable to understanding why people use Facebook, there are still reasons that go beyond his reasoning for the continued proliferation of Facebook.